So I went from streetwear to high fashion stuff, and I was just always, there was this like small disconnect between the garment itself and the garment on my body. And then I discovered Japanese fashion and denim. These pieces aren't about the graphic. They're not about the hype. They're not about the visual representation of wearing it. They're about the quality of the garments.
Yeah.
And that's when I really got into clothing. That's when I knew I wanted to make my own pieces. It finally clicked for me and connected, where I was like, this is the exact type of garment that I should be wearing. This is the exact type of garment that I want to like give to the world.
I'd love to start at the end, actually. So maybe let's start with where you're currently at.
Yeah.
And kind of what things look like right now, what you're doing, what that looks like even maybe in the next couple of years, and then we'll kind of work our way backwards.
Cool. I make denim for my brand Bonaso. I've been making clothes consistently for about 5 or 6 years now. I rebranded to Bonacel about a year ago. The name is an inspiration from my great-grandma, Mildred Bonacel. She was a seamstress and a quilter, and kind of the like original lineage of sewing in my family, I would say. And so I had this idea for a long time. I had this Bonacel denim idea for a long time. Like I knew I wanted to do it, but there were a lot of things. Like I had this design in my head, but it's not like I could just make it. Like there were things that had to happen before that, and certain like things that I needed to source, certain tags that needed to get made. Like I didn't want to start Bonacel denim and not have it be like what I could potentially make it. And I've been making clothes for a few years, so I knew like, okay, these pieces are good, but if I added a few additional things, like now I'd have an actual brand. And so it took me a little while to figure out like what the brand was, you know, but I finally got there. And yeah, for the past year, I've been making these products under the name Bonacel, and that's where I'm at. I'm trying to make about 1 or 2 pieces a week. I do have other jobs and other commitments, so it's not like I'm just sewing all day, every day. But that's my main thing right now is Bonacel, and trying to make the best possible workwear products under that name is my like the current thing that my mind is wrapped around.
Yeah, that's cool. And everything is essentially made to order. So nothing's being manufactured. You're making it. You're hand cutting and sewing everything yourself.
Yes. So far, yesterday I cut and started working on the 50th Bonacel garment.
Cool.
And I started this in June of 2022. So 50 garments in 52 weeks, essentially, like almost a garment a week. And I've made every single one. I've cut, sewn, and finished every single one of them myself. Most of the stuff is made to order. Like I would link up with you. We would talk about your measurements, certain styles that you like, maybe this fabric or this fabric. So I am doing that, but I'm also just kind of like making a small inventory of pieces that I like and things that I think people would like if it just so happened to fit them right, you know? So a little combination of both, like freestyling, making my own designs, and doing like a made to order type of thing,
Okay. What's been kind of like the biggest change you've seen? Because you were doing Easton Koch clothing, right? That's what it was before. When you made the jump to Bonacel, what have been some of the biggest impacts you've seen of going as a brand versus maybe as yourself, or just being more intentional with the brand? What have you kind of seen as the outcome of that?
A couple things come to my mind. One, like the pieces are just better. Like when I was doing the Easton Koch thing, I was just kind of like making whatever came to my mind. And that was awesome. Like I needed to do that. But these pieces are much more specific and much more like they fit into an exact category that I feel like I've created. This like hemp denim workwear thing that's also kind of artistic and got like a little bit of a streetwear emphasis going on. I would say definitely the pieces are better. Also, like I've always struggled with selling products for what I wanted to sell them for, you know?
Like cost-wise?
Yeah, and it's like whenever I would make something a couple years ago and it'd be done, I'd be like, okay, this is good. This isn't exactly what I meant to do. You know, maybe there's like a few little issues with it. And this was also like kind of how I was making money. So it was like, I'm just trying to sell this garment move on, make some money, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm like, okay, this is what this is supposed to look like. This is what it costs. There's no like in between on any of that. It's like, this is it. This is what it costs. This is the person who I'm targeting. And I've started to see like people are asking fewer and fewer questions about that. Like before I'd be like, man, like these are cool, but $200, geez, like why? You know, I'm experiencing much less of that, which is like really, I also think people are just kind of like coming around to the idea a little bit more. But yeah, it's been like, I've like my confidence, I'd say, in what I'm doing is just higher. It's like, this is what I do. This is what it costs. I'd love for you to support it. If not, you know, like there's other things for you. Whereas in the past, it'd be like, okay, like I understand that you like this, but you wish that it was black and you wish that it was cropped and okay, I'll make you that. You know, like I'm not really doing that anymore. I'm kind of like, this is what I do. I hope you like, you know, like I just feel like I've actually like carved out a little bit of a lane finally, and rather than like trying to accommodate to what anyone is willing to pay me for, it's like nah, this is what I do. Pay for it if you like it.
Yeah, and if not, it's not for you. That's okay.
And it is for people, you know. Like I've in a year I've realized like, oh no, there is like a lane of people that this is for. So
no, that's cool. What's crazy is like it's literally the same thing no matter what the creative discipline is, or really business in general, right? Like we were having a conversation a couple episodes ago with a photographer, and it's the same exact thing. It's like, oh yeah, you know, I'll take the standard, you know, suburban mom photos at first because they just sell. You know what I mean? Like the bright and airy and whatever, because that's like what I know people will do. But like eventually you get to a point to where you can actually just be you, and people actually just want you for you. Yep. And it seems like that's been the same exact thing, even with a physical product like clothing.
Yeah, and I agree with what you just said exactly. Like even in clothing, like you think that these brands just sell $1,000 garments all day long, but like a lot of the upper tier, like even high fashion brands, like they have ready to wear products that are more accessible and a little bit and that kind of like drives the majority of the sales, you know? And so like you do have to have that thing that relates to people and that is easier and more accessible. And then kind of let the more like avant-garde stuff be the aesthetic and be the vision and be the imagery behind it. And yeah, I think that works for all businesses. At some point, you have to figure out what sell. You know, it's not just all about creating exactly what you want. There has to be a little bit of a accountability on like, okay, what are people going to actually purchase? You know? Yeah.
No, that's real. Okay, so let's start to track backwards now. So you're born and raised in this area, you know, went to school here, grew up here, really formed a lot of who you are here through relationships, through family, you know, in the city. Take us back to, you know, the story of like, maybe we can even just start like high school into college, kind of like what's going on in your head, where are you at, what kind of kid are you, like right, what's that dynamic like?
Let's do it. Okay, I've played basketball my entire life. I've been super influenced by the sport of basketball specifically ever since I was a kid. The first thing I like ever really wanted to accomplish in my life was playing college basketball. So that was something that I was just like really, really influenced by. So when I was younger, man, I was like sketching sneakers. I like emailed Under Armour when I was a kid, like, hey, y'all need a lifestyle line. Like, look at what Nike's doing. Y'all, like, I had these thoughts about style and really shoes when I was younger, but even more so than just that, I had these thoughts when I was a kid, and it was really like basketball is the first thing that I can kind of attribute that to. Like when you're young, 10 years ago, like a young kid who plays basketball, when you pull up to an AAU basketball game, you can kind of infer who the better players are based off of like how they carry themselves, but also like there are certain basketball sneakers that like if you have those, you're good. Like there are EYBL Nike shoes, and so like you can I was able to pick up on that and kind of like read into like, okay, there is a little bit of like a style thing going on here, or a way to like differentiate yourself, you know? And so I was really into like on the court differentiating myself. And I got very good at basketball, and even with my game kind of like developed that a little bit. But I'd say that was my first like, oh my God, I have to have these basketball shoes. Like, oh my God, these Nike Elite. So I've never seen this color of Nike. Like I was really into that whole thing. And so that was kind of my first introduction to like independently representing myself somehow. Like if I just pull up to a basketball court and don't say anything, I'm going to get picked last if it's a good group of players. Like I'm 5'9" and not athletic, you know? So there are certain things that I could do. And also once I started playing, you know, like that would help too. But there were certain things that you can do to kind of like get yourself in the circle. And I picked up on that pretty early on. Basketball was a super big influence. And then when I got into high school, I had a friend who introduced me to streetwear. And I kind of picked up on some of those same things with streetwear. And like certain people would wear certain things and it would be kind of like a, you know, a way of representing yourself. And I got really into streetwear in high school, like the whole Virgil Pyrex thing. I remember like me and my homie Dom stayed up and like bought the Pyrex Vision t-shirts, and got really into Supreme and even like some skateboarding brands and things like that. So in high school, I was like basketball, streetwear. I was on Tumblr all the time, like saving like Jesse Rutherford picture, you know, ASAP Rocky stuff, like really into all that. And it was cool because I had friends who were like-minded. Like a lot of my homies were on the same exact wave. And also there was nobody really like that at the time. This was like 2012 in Olathe, Kansas, you know, like we were different. Like we dressed different, and like I was the best basketball player at our school. Like my homies were cool people. Like we kind of stood out a little bit. And that was the first time I kind of felt that, like, okay, I liked it. Like I'm into this whole thing. So yeah, streetwear was kind of my first, and like we would just get on Tumblr and get on like the Supreme archives, and like during class we just be on our phones like sending each other like, oh man, I wish I could cop this, blah blah blah. So that was kind of like early on in high school. That was me. And we started a little t-shirt brand. We were pushing some t-shirts in high school and hoodies and stuff like that. And I was like, I just loved it. I just really loved it. And was fortunate enough to play basketball in college. And then that's kind of where my like cut and sew journey starts to take place. Yeah. But yeah, I went from streetwear. I bought, like, when you're in high school and you don't have to pay for rent, I don't have any expenses. So I'm like buying a lot of clothes at this time because I had a part-time job, bussing tables, and like all that money would just be like free for me to do whatever I wanted with. And I remember too, I got a lot of money from my high school graduation. I was like, okay, like I'm about to go crazy. So it started with streetwear, and I would get these pieces and I would like them and I would love, you know, I'd post Instagram pictures wearing them or whatever, but it didn't like fully connect with my style. I was still like searching for my style, I would say. So I was like, I'm into this, but this doesn't fully, like, I don't feel 100% myself wearing these loud Supreme pieces, you know? I got into high fashion stuff shortly after that, wearing like Raf Simons and Rick Owens, not like full $1,000, but like I had some like Rick Owens Ramones, some Raf Oswegos, a couple t-shirts, things like that, and had a very similar experience with a very similar personal experience where I was like, I like this stuff a lot, but it doesn't totally relate to what I think my style is. Yeah. So I went from streetwear to high fashion stuff and like European fashion stuff. And I was just always, there was this like small disconnect between like the garment itself and the garment on my body. And then I discovered Japanese fashion and denim. And Baldwin was kind of the first thing here in Kansas City, but East West when it opened. And I was like, okay, this is the lane I'm supposed to be in. This, like, I would consider Japanese fashion as kind of like a cross between like American workwear and streetwear almost. Like there's lanes to it, obviously. But that was what I got really into, was like, okay, this isn't streetwear, but I feel this like little tiny similar vibe from the stuff that I originally got into. But it was like, these pieces aren't about the graphic or they're not about the hype. They're not about the visual representation of wearing it. They're about the quality of the garments.
Yeah.
And that's when I really got into clothing. That's when I really started looking at things differently. That's when I knew I wanted to make my own pieces. It finally clicked for me and connected, where I was like, this is the exact type of garment that I should be wearing. This is the exact type of garment that I want to like give to the world. And it was all this like engineered garments, capital, even some more like nuanced Japanese brands, but like stuff like that, where I was like really into not only how it looked and fit on me, because the proportions are a little bit different, but also just like how insanely detailed the little things were on those type of garments. Yeah.
That's cool. So, you know, you're having that realization, you're getting to this point where you're like, the only way I'm going to achieve this is by making it myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, that wasn't my first thought.
Okay.
My first thought was like, oh, I'll just pay someone to make this stuff for me. You know, like, oh, I have all these sketches. I'd been sketching stuff. Like, that's what I did. I don't sketch anymore at all, really, because I don't have to. But back then, I couldn't sew anything. So I was just sketching a bunch of stuff. And my first thought was like, oh, I'll just pay someone to make this for me. And we can get into the story of like how that came to fruition, but that was the wrong thought for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd love to hear like, so eventually you start learning basically cut and sew. So maybe let's go like, where did you start learning cut and sew, and like, how did that even come into play?
Okay. So this was my sophomore year of college at William Jewell. My freshman year of college, I was doing what I just talked about, like buying a lot of stuff, sketching a lot of stuff, posting things on social media that I liked. But my sophomore year of college, I took a class at William Jewell. William Jewell's a weird school, man. But there was a class there I took called Creativity and Innovation. That was the name of the class. I was like, okay, this sounds really cool. The very first class, the teacher, his name was Landon Young, a really influential person in my life. He went around the room and he was just asking everyone what they wanted to do when they got older. And I was the last person. And I remember thinking, like, as he was going through, I was like, am I going to tell these people what I actually want to do in life? I was like, am I just going to say, you know, I'm a business? I was like questioning what I was going to say. And it finally got to me and I was just like, yeah, man, I want to make clothes. Like, that's what I want to do. And the teacher was like, oh, nice. Have you ever heard of Baldwin denim? That was his exact response. And I was like, yeah, like I was just at the shop on the plaza like this past week. Like, yeah, I've heard of Baldwin denim. And he's like, oh yeah, I had dinner with Matt Baldwin a couple weeks ago. Like, I'd love to introduce you to him. So I was like, what? I was like, what is going on right now? So anyway, this teacher and I developed a really strong relationship. He did actually bring Matt Baldwin to lecture for that class like a couple months later, which was awesome. I think that was because of me. But yeah, that was awesome. I did the creativity and innovation class. We developed a real bond. And then the next semester, I did an independent study with him where I was the only person in his class, and he bought me a bunch of denim and a janky home sewing machine. And he was like, all right, man, you got the resources now. I need 10 pairs of jeans. He was like, this semester, you got to make me 10 pairs of jeans. He's like, you have the machine, you have the fabrics, figure it out. So for an entire semester, and even a little bit longer than that probably, but man, I watched the exact same YouTube video on how to construct a pair of jeans. I watched it Angela Kane sewing tutorials. Like, I remember her page. I watched this denim construction video over and over and over and made some jeans, man. And like, obviously the first pair was pretty shitty, but the 10th pair was all right, actually. Like, I was very proud of the last pair. And I even had like tags. I had like Easton Koch, Kansas City tags at that point, and was like starting to brand them a little, because that's what I understood from buying and being so involved, was like, okay, you have to have a brand. Like, you know, you can't just make jeans. Like, there has to be some Bro, I would like certain brands just because I like their tag so much. Just
Yeah.
because the tag looked so clean, and like Acne Studios just like look presented so well on that tag, and it was just so clean. So I understood that part of it. And yeah, man, the 10th pair of jeans I made was pretty good actually. And I figured it out. Like, starting with jeans is not what I assume teachers in the sewing industry, or classes who teach, would recommend. Like, I think jeans is a pretty like a more
difficult.
advanced form of sewing. So starting with that really helped me actually, because I just like got my feet wet, jumped in the deep end, and was like, okay, I had never made a T-shirt, I had never practiced any sample, nothing. Like, I just started making jeans, and yeah, I learned early on, like, okay, like this sewing machine can't sew this thick denim. There were a lot of things that like you don't learn, like you wouldn't know unless you actually make jeans. And so there was just a lot of that I learned and figured it out. The 10th pair I made was okay, and like every pair I've made since has just gotten a little better and a little better and a little better. And now I can make, bags and shirts and jackets and T-shirts and all kinds of things. So
That's cool.
yeah, that's a story. That's how it went. That's pretty much how it went.
That's crazy. So literally, like a college professor
Yep.
just gave you an opportunity.
Yeah, and I haven't talked to him in a little while. I probably need to reach out to him. But for even after I graduated, Landon, this teacher, was like really helping me. Like, we would meet once a week. He wasn't necessarily like fashion entrepreneurial person, but he was very entrepreneurial and had a couple businesses, and was just always giving me like, okay, I know you want to do this, but you should think about this too. He was like the first person to be like, okay, yes. He was like a yes, and like, you need to also think about these things. And yeah, just really influential and really helped me a lot. And I don't know if I would have ever taken that leap to like, okay, it's hard to buy a $300 sewing machine when you don't know how to thread it,
Right.
So I credit him for like that initial push, kind of. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, man.
So he's a huge influence. You now know Cut and Sew. How soon after that do you start actually releasing some things as like Easton Koch clothing?
Okay, so there were still some trials and tribulations for sure. So I made these 10 pairs of jeans, shot them, posted them. That was my semester, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think at the time, well, I know how to do, like, I know how this works. Like, I know exactly how to design clothes. So I'm going to get some stuff manufactured. And William Jewell had a program called the Journey Grant at that school, where you could apply for a Journey Grant and you could get between $2,000 and $4,000 to travel somewhere, and you'd have to like write a paper on it. Well, another thing you could use that money for, if you were an entrepreneur, was take that money and put it towards your creative endeavor, whatever that was. So I applied, I got like $3,000, and I put all of that money into manufacturing a line of clothes with this factory in Lima, Peru. And it was an absolute nightmare, like complete shit show, horrible experience. Really good for me looking back on it, because it gave me an insight into what the manufacturing industry is like. But I give it a 0 out of 10 as far as like the experience goes. Like, it was really bad. It was really rough. And I also learned at that point, there's a lot more to this than just like, oh, I made a pair of jeans. Okay, let's make 200 pairs. I learned like, oh my God, there's so many things that can go wrong in the communication process between, hey, here's my jean, and now they've made 200 of them. Like, I learned the hard way. Luckily, it was a grant of money. It wasn't like my money. But I learned the hard way that like, it's just hard. It's really hard to make clothes, and it's really hard to like communicate your exact design. And what a factory will do is if any aspect of that design hasn't been communicated, well, they're just going to do what they think they should do. They're not going to waste the time to email you and say, "Hey, we don't know what to do here. Can you let us know?" That's wasting time for this factory. You know, they're not going to do that. They're going to just push forward and get this done as quickly as possible in whatever fashion is going to like give them a check in the box, you know? So I learned a lot about the manufacturing industry through that. I learned that I had to go all the way back to the drawing board. I also actually didn't make any jeans through this factory. I was making like wool sport coats and wild stuff that like, you know, again, stuff that if I could go back, I would refine it all. But I did make this line of clothing. I started a brand called After Hours at that point in time with a couple people from the city. And that was like the first, it was my brand, but I had some help from a couple other friends. And that was kind of like my first venture into, here's my brand. We have pieces for sale, you know, buy some stuff from. That was kind of the first time that I like sold pieces for real.
Yeah.
And the pieces were terrible. None of them fit right at all. Like the larges fit like smalls. The smalls, literally you couldn't even wear the smalls. Lots of like little things that just weren't executed correctly. My tag, the printing on the tags, like one of the words was spelt wrong. Just like horrible experience. But that was, and I remember getting these pieces in and being like heartbroken, but also being like, okay, like this is what I've got. Like I'm gonna sell this shit. Like I'm gonna still, you know, these people don't know that I didn't mean for this to come out this way. So, and like if you just look at the pictures, like if I showed you, this was in 2017, if I showed you like the lookbook for this, you'd be like, oh my God, bro, that shit is fire. Like even today, you'd probably be like, yo, that's really good. But just, it looked good, you know, and some people still probably think is really dope. But to me, it just, I learned that the execution is not just like, oh, this factory is going to just do everything perfectly for me. You know, like there's a lot of things that you can do as a designer to like make that process a little bit easier and lower the risk of it being a catastrophe like it was for me the first time.
So would you say that your choice to, at least at the moment, right, like do everything kind of made to order, you're cutting, sewing everything yourself, is that primarily a choice just because you know you can execute the best yourself, as well as maybe the financial piece of like having the capital to go get 1,000 pieces made, you know what I mean? Or is it kind of both, or is it one or the other? Or?
Yeah, it's a good question. So where I'm at right now, I do want to work with factories. Like there are some things that I want to get manufactured, cause like you know, that's what every successful brand does. There's very few people who make a living just making one-off pieces. And I do, like, bro, I have very high aspirations. I want to create a global brand, and to do that, part of it requires like getting some stuff manufactured. But I've also learned like there are certain factories that do certain things, and just kind of like being like, hey, factory, here's what I make, you know, do it for me. That's not very realistic. Versus like working with this one factory connection that I have in Seattle who like makes really good t-shirts, you know, like, okay, this guy can make a really good t-shirt. I've sampled one with him. I've worked with him before. He communicates well to me. That's another thing. These factories are horrible at communicating. So it was like, okay, I found a good situation here. I'm not going to ask this guy to make my jeans for me, you know? Like, I don't want him to feel like he needs to say yes and then can't do it, and all those kinds of things that happen. So where I'm at right now, I am in the process of figuring out, like, what pieces am I going to be making myself, because that's always going to be a component of my brand too, but also what can I outsource. What can I help build an actual inventory with? Because that's my problem right now, is I just don't have enough clothes.
Right.
Like, I'd love to go do a pop-up in LA next weekend, but I have 3 garments on hand because the rest have sold. It's like a good problem to have, but that's kind of where I'm at, is like figuring out how to build an inventory. What's the the best way to go about doing that. And then also adding in these like custom bespoke pieces that I make myself.
Yeah. So what's the next 5 years look like? What are you dreaming? What's your aspirations? Like what do you see the next 5 years holding for you and the brand?
Right now, currently my stuff is carried in Gavel, the menswear store right down the street here in Kansas City. Gavel is an incredible menswear shop. It is the best menswear shop in Kansas City and one of the best in the Midwest, if not the United States, for sure. You've probably been there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's an incredible shop. I'm very blessed to have my stuff carried there. I'd like to have a similar relationship like I have at Gavel with a couple other stores across the United States. I can think of a couple in in Colorado. I can think of one in New Orleans. I can think of one in St. Louis. Really even like Midwest focused kind of to start. But if I had like 5 or 6 stores that are doing a similar thing to what Gavel is doing for me, that would be a really big jump, I think. And to get to that point, I have to have inventory. So that's kind of like before I'm able to do that, I have to build this inventory out. But that's the next like year or two. I'd really like to figure out how to turn this one account I have here in Kansas City into like 6.
Yep.
And then also I'd like to hire a couple people. Right now it's just me. I have a lot of freelance people who help me, but I'd like to have one additional full-time sewer who's helping me do all of the sewing. And then I'd also like to I'm working on potentially bringing in someone to help me with like content and video and some of the more creative side of stuff too. So hire, I'm not looking for a big team. Hire like 1 or 2 people and turn one account into 5 or 6. And other than that, just kind of keep doing what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Super. What I love about that is like, you can achieve that.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's like kind of this concept of like, oh, you should set unrealistic goals, or I feel like that's become really popular like in the last couple of years, especially with social media and stuff. But that's like, you can hit that probably sooner than 5 years, sure. Right? And so,
let's really go back a little bit.
Yeah,
I have super unrealistic goals. Like, that's been like probably my biggest problem just as a human is like. I wanted to play in the NBA, like I have very unrealistic goals, but to me they're realistic. I have very, very high standards for myself, but I've also realized this a while ago, I'm going to make clothes for my entire life. Like, even if it's not brand, like I'll start itching after like a week if I haven't sewn something. It's like, okay, this is what I do. This is like a part of who I am. I need to make something. So like, I know I'm going to be doing this for a really, really long time. And I also know that like a lot of successful people in fashion are older, because it's really hard to just like start something in Kansas City and in a year you're, on Vogue or some, I don't have that wild of expectations, but it's like in the course of my life, in the course of the next like 30 years, I do have a lot of things that I think I can achieve, and that are kind of more in the like commercial fashion realm of things. Like, but yeah, like the next 5 years, kind of my game plan for growing and marketing my stuff is like getting a couple more accounts here in the United States. And then I do think if I am able to like get my stuff carried in Japan, get 5 or 6 stores in Japan, I think that could really like ignite things exponentially. There's like this weird thing that happens with American and Japanese brands where like they won't be that big here in America, but then they'll blow up in Japan, and then because they blew up in Japan, they'll blow up over here. There's a lot of this kind of like bouncing back and forth, and I think that my stuff fits like perfectly into that.
Absolutely.
Into that mold. Yeah. And I think I just see a lot of Japanese I've studied, I've done my reading on this, and I feel like I am, mindset wise, I consume the same way as the way the Japanese consume. And like, yeah, they're gonna fuck with my stuff whenever it's more accessible over there. But that's kind of, rather than like, trying to make this, I've never had like never wanted to be the best brand in Kansas City. I've never really wanted to be the best brand in the United States. Like I've always wanted to get my shit over in Japan. Yeah.
Mm. That's cool.
Yeah.
Better product market fit.
Definitely.
That's cool. Sweet, man. Well, okay, so this is what you're doing. This is where you want to be, right? For the person who's not where you are now even, right? Maybe they're still in college. Maybe it's a high school kid, right? Who's, they like streetwear, they like fashion. Maybe they like fashion, but it's not streetwear. Maybe it's a different genre or whatever. But either way, they're like, I think I maybe want to make clothes. Like, what would you tell that person if you had to go back and talk to yourself? Like, how would you be encouraging them? What practically would you tell them to do to kind of get where you're at now?
Okay. You got to learn how to sew. I think that was like the biggest thing for me was like whenever I really learned how to sew, I was like, no wonder this shit came back poorly. Like no wonder that this wasn't right. So I think there's just so much that you can't even communicate about your designs until you know how to make them.
Yeah.
That it's like you're going to save a lot of money and a lot of time and just a lot of stress if you can communicate your design down all the way to like the stitch length of whatever seam is being sewn. So there's so many, there's like a whole vernacular, like a whole language built around like making a pair of jeans, like terms that you don't know, like what is seam allowance? Like that's a very basic thing for someone who sews, but if you've never sewn before, you don't know what that means, So I would say learn how to sew, like and Rick Owens has a clip on TikTok literally saying he's just like, learn how to sew, bro. Like before you can do it. And the thing that I've kind of related it to is like, you can be a chef in a restaurant if you don't know how to make the dishes. Like you can say yes and no to these things, but you're not going to be as ill-equipped, or you're not going to be able to spot the very tiny mistakes if you don't know exactly how that dish is made, Yep. It's like I can be a designer and I can get these clothes back from this factory and I can be like, yeah, this works. But if I don't know how they put it together, or if I don't know how to put it together myself, there might be certain things. And this was something that happened to me too. Like whenever I got my samples back from this factory in Peru, I could have said, no, this isn't right. We need to do another round of samples and fix these things. But I was just like, yeah, perfect. Let's manufacture 50 of each of these, because I couldn't spot the mistakes. I couldn't spot the fact that they didn't top stitch the pocket. Just like little stuff that it's like now I'd look at this and be like, no, this is not good. Like you need to do a better job. I would say learn how to sew. Like if you want to get into selling clothes, learn how to sew. Learn how to sew. There's a lot of other lanes and jobs in fashion. Like now you can literally make more money than me just talking about clothes. Like there's a lot of different lanes. But if you want to start a brand, or if you want to like sell your own garments, learn how to sew. Like that, learn how to make the pieces. And once you get good at that, you'll be able to look at something and know how it was made. Like you're going to be able to look at two shirts and tell which one is actually better, not just based off the price tag, or not just based off of which brand you like better, but like which garment is actually constructed at a higher quality.
Right.
And I think that's really important. I think you can't really, there's no other way to learn other than to just like do it, figure it out. Go to school for it if you have to. I didn't. But I've also been, it's been 6 years of me making pieces. Like that has been my school,
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, you got to learn how to sew, I think.
And, and with your college professor being such a big influence as well and giving you an opportunity, I mean, obviously that made a huge difference in you, getting started, right?
Yeah.
At least getting that jump start. So, I mean, it's like, obviously that's really important for someone who's, not having that practical, maybe they don't have that relationship right now, maybe they don't have the person in their life that's going to help them do that. How can they find that person?
You got to put yourself out there. Like even I know it probably in this interview it sounds very like stupid that I was like, I don't even know if I'm gonna tell this guy that I want to make clothes. But in the moment, I did put myself out there a little bit, you know. And other examples for me personally, like I was emailing people at Baldwin Denim, like, hey, you want to get coffee? Because these people sell the garments that I want to make. So it's like anything I can do to pick their brain, even if they don't know how to make them. Like, why is this brand being sold? Why is this shirt being sold for $200 when this one's being sold for 65? You know, like there were a lot of questions that I had, and I did put myself out there when I was younger for sure. Just like trying to meet people in Kansas City that were like-minded, people that were in the industry. I mean, there's no industry here, but like Baldwin was a real thing. And bro, I would just go there like once a week and just, you know, Cam was working at Baldwin at the time. And I remember we had a conversation that I was just like, man, I love this brand right now called Our Legacy. I don't know. He's like, bro, like I'm trying to get Our Legacy picked up here. And we, you know, like we formed that connection. Well, 5 years later, I'm working for him at Gavel. So it's like weird how things work. I think you just have to put yourself out there. And the truth is like the less you know in fashion, almost the better. It's like the more you can do that, the less you know. So if you're sitting there and you just have a lot of questions, I'd be like, man, put yourself out there, reach out to me, get coffee with me, or anywhere in your area that like someone is selling nice clothes or whatever kind of clothes that you're into. Like, bro, go get coffee with them, ask them how they started their situation or their shop. I think you gotta do that. You definitely have to do that. And like around here, there's not a ton of people like that you can reach out to and ask, but I'm one of them. So yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Well, maybe talk a little bit as we kind of come to the end here. You know, you're in Kansas City. You're still here. Obviously, you haven't left yet.
Yeah.
So, do you feel?
I've thought about it.
I'm sure you have. I mean, a lot of us.
We've all thought about it.
We've all thought about it, but there's a reason we're all still here, right?
We've all made up our mind that we're leaving at some point, just to never actually leave.
Well, I'm curious though, because I feel like when I look at like people all over the city who maybe have had the opportunity to leave but chose to stay because they feel like they could actually build something and add a lot of value to the community here, right? So it feels like there's kind of a gap in what you do here. And do you feel like you have the opportunity to really own what you're wanting to do in Kansas City and the community here?
Yes, I do. My mindset has changed recently. For a while, I took a lot of other people's input about what this city was like and kind of let that be my opinion for what it was like, you know, like just people would be like, bro, no one's going to buy $300 jeans in Kansas City, you know? So in my head, I'm like, well, all right, you know, no one's going to buy $300 jeans. So I need to sell them for $195, like a lot of that. Whereas I think in reality, like there's not a clothing industry. There's really not even like an artistic industry here. Like there's not a lot of money coming into these things.
Yeah.
Or influence. And I think that like someone like myself and like Cam, especially, like we can kind of shape that a little bit.
Absolutely.
We can kind of like be the foundation for what people think of when they think of like the Kansas City menswear scene.
Yeah.
And it's cool because there is a style here, and I've really picked up on that working at Gavel. But like there is a certain way that men here like to dress, and I do think that Bonacel fits into it perfectly.
For sure.
But yeah, like my mindset has changed. In the past, you know, one thing I've always wanted to do in life is open my own clothing store. And for a long time, I just never even considered Kansas City. But if I was opening a store today, I think this would be the perfect place to do it for that reason. And also, like, this place is growing. Like, there's actually a lot of cool shit happening in Kansas City right now. And I kind of felt that, like, this last Super Bowl when the Chiefs won. And it wasn't just that. It was some other stuff. for the last like 4 to 6 months, I've been like, damn, like this place is actually like really, really hot right now. And there's
Absolutely.
a lot of opportunity, not only for people in fashion, but just for people in the artistic industry out here. Everyone out here, there's no industry. So everyone out here is like an independent hustler and grinder.
Yep.
No one, like, there are a few exceptions to that, but no one really is like working for who they want to be working for here in Kansas City. They're doing some, shitty side job, and then they're working on their own thing. And I think you can feel that here. I think that kind of permeates throughout a lot of Kansas City culture. And I also think it creates this kind of like reason to support. Kind of creates this like reason to support whatever is actually dope that's going, because like you can like, every city has people who make things that it's just like, okay, it's not, I don't really care, but there are enough people here in Kansas City that are making things that are like super cool and completely self-funded and like completely on their own, that like deserve some attention. And there's enough of that to support, I think, like a movement here whenever that happens. And I do think that people like myself and Cam can kind of be at the forefront of that for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would 100% agree. There's like there's a level of momentum right now that's kind of hard to, I haven't been here nearly as long as you have, but kind of off and on for the last like 7 years or so. And there's definitely something happening.
Yeah. It's like, I've lived in the city for about 5 years now, and like I didn't really ever feel that. I've always liked it here just because like it's super affordable. My friends and family are here. I do like this place, but I've always just kind of been like, it's too slow, or there's not enough happening, or we need more, whatever. And like, the last 6 months, it's like you can feel that starting to take shape, I think. Yeah.
Well, a comment I've heard really recently within the creative space in Kansas City is that it's too maybe exclusive. So like it's a small circle. Like let's just take video or photo, for example. Like, oh, it's a small circle of people who are doing all the handful of commercial jobs that are actually done here in Kansas City, right? Because there's just not a ton of them.
Right.
So it's like the barrier to entry seems to be like really big and or really small, basically. And so it's like, unless you know somebody or you whatever, and then it's not really going to happen, right? You're not going to get into whatever. But I don't know, like the more people I talk to, especially people who are based in Kansas City, it's just this understanding of like, that's a mindset.
It is.
Like it's more about like, see the opportunity that maybe it feels that way because there just actually isn't very many opportunities. And so there's just a smaller pond right now. Eventually that pond will grow.
Yeah.
So can you be able to see the opportunities that could be and just build a relationship with people? I think that's the biggest thing too, is like, I think I've heard some people complaining about like, and obviously you never want to take the complainers as the standard,
right?
Because they're not living with gratitude or whatever anyway, or have a place from optimism or whatever. But what can we do to like make it feel more inclusive so that more people can be a part of and grow with Kansas City creatively and encourage each other to do things creatively?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I definitely agree with I feel the notion that it is like there's a low barrier of entry. Like I do understand that, because what I've been saying is just there's no industry. So it's like you're not going to get any of those jobs that you would in another place that has that. But at the same time, like if you email someone here in Kansas City about what they do and you're showing interest in helping them, they're going to respond. Like people here want that. Like it's not like people are, like getting 50, 100 emails a day. Like, hey, can I take you to coffee? Hey, can I pick your brain? Like, when that happens once every month or whatever, it's like, yes, like I would love to share any bit of information I can with you. And it's like, I love sharing this kind of information with other people because I didn't always know this information, and I had to like seek out how to obtain it and like seek out how to figure all these things out. And like a lot of people helped me along the way. It wasn't just like, you know, I read a book and all of a sudden I'm like this master fashion entrepreneur. It was like there were so many people that helped me along the way, but every single one of those people I took the time to reach out to and to form a connection with and to build a relationship with. And like that's really all you have to do. Like if your mindset is like, oh, I'm not going to do that, well then it doesn't matter if you're where you're at, you know, you're not going to have as good of an opportunity to like make your dreams come true, just or get the job that you want or whatever it is. Whereas if you are willing to put yourself out there, make connections with people, ask questions that, you know, might sound dumb, but you don't know the answers. That's kind of how you, that's how you get the ball rolling. And like everyone, I'm telling you, there's no one here that's going to be an asshole just because you're like, hey man, I'd like to learn more about what you do. Like people are going to say yes. Like people want to share their information because they're like me, you know, they built it from the beginning, from the jump, just themselves, and they had people help them along the way. And it's like, whenever you have that mindset, whenever you realize that like there's 30 plus people, if not more, who have helped you get to where you're at, well, then you have no problem helping this one person in any way they can. So that's the good thing about this place. Like I would just say, keep that like optimism in the back of your head. Like hit people up. Like there are people here, whether it's in fashion or video or other realms of art. Like, bro, all you have to do is go walk the crossroads in if you're a painter and you don't know any galleries to get, like, walk First Fridays and ask two people, how did you get your paint? You know, like there are ways to, the food scene here is insane. Like if you're into food, there's so many things you can do. And I think you just have to like put yourself out there and do it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's so good, man. Well, just to kind of actually wrap up here, anything that you're working on, any side projects, anything that you, just to kind of close, want people to know about?
Sure.
If there's anything specific like that?
I work at Gavel. Gavel is an incredible menswear store. If y'all are into quality men's clothing and you haven't been there, you should check it out. I also sell my stuff there. I am currently, for my brand, just like making kind of whatever I like. And on top of that, I'm also doing made to order pieces for people. And on top of that, I'm also like getting some t-shirts made, getting some hats made, getting some like easier like point of entry pieces put together so that people can support the brand even if they don't want to buy a $300 pair of jeans. So I'm like in the process of doing all that. The next big thing that I am planning to do probably either sometime towards the end of this year, like early 2024, is run a Kickstarter campaign for Bonaso. And the money that I raise from that will be to build a little bit of an inventory. So like get a small inventory of jeans on hand, hire one or two people, and like, you know, get a couple extra machines and pay rent. And like, you know, like raise a little bit of money to actually like turn this like really, like, yes, I have a business, but it is just me. And, you know, I am an entrepreneurial person. I graduated with a degree in business administration. So I know like, okay, you have to have a team of people to make this a real business, to actually like scale this at all. So that's kind of, my next plan is to raise a little bit of capital to do that. And from that point, I think things could get really exciting for me and turn one account like Gavel into 5 or 6 and start traveling and getting my stuff in other markets and keep making really, really awesome stuff. So that's kind of like the next 6 months plan. You know, got to shoot a video there's a lot that goes into, I haven't done a Kickstarter campaign, so I'm actively like researching and studying how to successfully do that. Yeah. And in the meantime, just like I'm working on some short sleeve mechanic shirts right now that no one asked for. I just was like, these are going to be dope. So I'm going to make them. And then luckily I'm at a situation where I can put them in Gavel and they'll sell at some point. So making new stuff kind of like once a week or however I can, knocking out my pre-orders and custom orders and figuring out how to take this thing to the next level.
That's awesome.
Yeah, man. I love it.
Heck yeah. Well, thanks for your time today.
Bro, thank you. Yeah. This is dope.
Thanks, man.
There needs to be more people shedding light on what people are doing here in Kansas City. So I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you taking the time to do this. And I'm excited for you. I'm pumped for what you're doing. I'm proud that you're building something you're proud of here in Kansas City.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to support you.
Thank you, bro.
I'm a big fan.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, bro.